Escape from Tarkov, or not exactly escaping from Tarkov, because if you're watching this, chances are you are a beginner like me, and that means you've probably died a lot since watching this video. You've probably questioned or contemplated why exactly it is you bought Escape from Tarkov. And, well, the truth is, Tarkov is the most difficult shooter on the market right now, and in this video today, I want to talk to you from one beginner to another, as somebody who only has a month in the game, but for the most part, I've really nailed down everything I know about Tarkov, and I think a lot of the stuff I'll tell you guys today, for people who are just getting started, or perhaps some of you who left the game for a while because you felt like you weren't doing very well and it wasn't really your kind of game, that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, everything in Tarkov. And we're going to start from in-game and then work our way to the stash, because a lot of you probably have questions about what it is exactly you should be looking for when you're playing Tarkov before you have questions about your stash, but both of them are pretty equally important, and we're going to work through all of that. I'm going to start with fundamental questions about gameplay and what you should be doing there. I'm then going to move on to settings, and then finally we're going to talk about your stash, trading, weapons, everything in between. So let's start with gameplay, and in Escape from Tarkov I highly recommend people use the scav runs. Now, in Tarkov, you had the choice between being your PMC and a scav. Now, a PMC is somebody who levels up, it is your main character, and that's the person that will extract the vast majority of loot for you. You level up your PMC, you do tasks through the traders, so when you go into the trader menu, there is a tasks panel, and that's basically questing. It's the equivalent of questing in Tarkov. And that stuff will get you some pretty good loot, and it's a great way to earn various different weapons, various different items, and some money as well. But for the most part, you will have the choice between PMCs and scavs, and for brand new players, I highly recommend doing as many scav runs as you humanly can. And let me explain why. Now, in Escape from Tarkov, for those of you who aren't familiar, there are scavs and there are PMCs. PMCs are your online multiplayer players, people who will shoot you at first possible glance because, well, that's basically what people do in this game. They want to kill you, they want your loot, they want everything you have, and if you've earned some of those tasty Twitch drops, then they're definitely going to be after you. But for the most part, there are AI-controlled scavs. Now, you can tell if somebody is a scav or an AI scav because they're often not very well geared. They tend to run around with mostly archaic weaponry like shotguns or, AK-74Us. They shout in Russian. No PMC shouts in Russian because if you do that, you give away your position. And they tend to run around pretty simplistically, they're not ducking and diving and weaving, they're not crouching, they're not looting bodies. For the most part, they're sort of, just running in a straight line, looking left to right, and it's often very easy to identify a scav. And the more you play the game, the more you'll see the telltale signs. They don't really do a lot, they just sort of run in straight lines, sometimes in groups, and if you do a scav run, these guys won't shoot you. If you're a PMC, everything is hostile. These AI scavs will shoot at you if they see you, other PMCs will shoot at you, but when you do a scav run, you eliminate 50% of the threat on the map. And scav runs are a really great way of easing you into the game, easing you into understanding maps, easing you into understanding everything that's going on around you, being able to identify who's a scav and who's an enemy player, and everything in between. As a scav, you spawn with a random amount of loot, with a random amount of health in a random game, and it's a great opportunity because you haven't brought anything into the game to leave with a decent amount of loot, whether it's the stuff you spawn in with or stuff you kill other people with. That's the best way to get some pretty quick loot in a very minimal risk way, and it refuels every 15 minutes. I think it's a really great way to ease you into the game, it's a good way to stack up initial loot, and it's a good way to get you prepared for what being a PMC in Tarkov is like, and all of the threats around it. And I highly recommend that you use one map over and over and over again to truly build knowledge of it. Once you have the knowledge of a map, and you use game maps will be linked in the description below, it's really good to understand the map around you, understand where people head towards loot, where the loot is, where you should be concerned about, where enemy scavs spawn, and those are really great options to you. I will leave a link in the description below to game maps, which includes all of the maps for Escape from Tarkov, but as a suggestion, I highly recommend you go with Woods as your initial map. It's not the largest map in the world, it's very easy to identify enemy players, and it's a very open map as well. It's not one of those ones like Factory, where you just instantly get blitzed from directions you don't even know about. You can take your time in this map. And personally, I would really ignore all of these sort of hard, insane, easy, medium markers that they use on the maps. You know, for example, Woods is listed as hard or insane, but for the most part, I think that's probably the easiest map in the game because it gives you a lot more room to move around in and more time to think about your decisions, and more importantly, more time to identify PMCs and scavs in the distance. So much like DayZ or PUBG or any other map-based game, you want good knowledge of the maps, you want to understand what you're doing, you want to understand where enemy players possibly could be, where they're looking for, and where you're going to see scav locations as well. And on a scav run, bear in mind that if you shoot at an enemy scav, you yourself will become hostile. So if there are 4 scavs around you and you shoot one of them, the other 3 are going to start shooting at you. But if you do happen to catch a scav out in the woods by himself with nobody else around him, it's a really good idea to actually just kill the scav. They will probably have a decent weapon on them. If you see them with something like a Mosin, an AK, something with a suppressor, maybe a suppressed SKS, then there's really no harm in killing a lone scav in the woods and taking their loot. But just be very careful about, you know, suddenly being shot at by 16 different scavs because you've just murdered their buddy. So now that you're actually in the game, now that you've chosen a scav run or you're finally starting to use PMC runs to level up your character, let's talk about how Tarkov works. This is not Call of Duty, this is not Battlefield. In fact, the closest game you can probably associate Escape from Tarkov to is DayZ. And Escape from Tarkov is one of the most audio-based shooters that exists. It's a bit like Siege in that sense, where every single sound matters. And the best analogy I can build you is the film A Quiet Place. Now, for those of you who have seen A Quiet Place, and for those of you who haven't, A Quiet Place is a film about these alien monsters that track down people based on sound. You know, you make the slightest bit of noise and suddenly you're getting your head torn off by an extraterrestrial. Escape from Tarkov is the same thing, but with militant people. If you make a sound in Escape from Tarkov, people will gravitate towards that sound. And your number one friend in Escape from Tarkov is the scroll wheel in the bottom right corner. If you use your mouse scroll wheel, you can slow your character down, and if you're crouching, if you put it to the 0 setting, you will make more or less 0 noise at the cost of mobility, but you can adjust your speed almost completely throughout the entire game. And if you enter bushes or start hitting towards plants, or you want to hide in a bush, or you want to hide next to a tree, turning your scroll wheel all the way down to 0 and crouching is a great way of getting into foliage without making any sound. You need to understand that in this game, people can hear you stomping around, people can hear you whacking bushes and whacking leaves around you from a relatively fair distance, and it's only once you actually kill somebody because they've made this huge sound and you know exactly where they are, will you truly understand that this game is an audio-based game. It's audio-visual, it's what you see, it's what you hear, but for the most part, in your immediate proximity, you should be concerned about the sound you're making. You can see it in this gameplay. A lot of the time I am on minimal speed, I'm crouching, I'm trying to walk or move relatively slowly. If I think I hear or see something, I slow right down, I instantly freeze. If I hear somebody coming, I stop moving. If I hear somebody moving in the distance, I slow down. If I'm concerned that I'm in the location of an enemy, you'll be able to hear loads of gunshots going on around you and things like grenades and whatnot. The second you have the slight inkling of an idea that one of those gunshots has come from nearby to you, you slow right down. And when you do that, like the gameplay that I've demonstrated here, you have a much higher opportunity to get the drop on people. Because Tarkov isn't about, you know, who can 1v1 somebody better, who's got the aim, who's got the trick shot. For the most part, the shooting experience is who has got the drop on somebody else, who has almost kind of stalked the other person. Think of yourself as a hunter in a hunting range, and that's what Tarkov is. Are you the hunter, or are you being hunted? And sound is a huge component of how that happens. And if you start understanding that and taking every single movement you make, every single gunshot you fire, every single sprint you do, with a huge self-awareness and understanding that you are attracting attention, then you will die less and you will kill people more. Other important keys include free look, which you can bind to anything, just make sure you're not clashing it with anything else. And a few other ones as well. For example, if you Alt right click, you can often change the reticle of your optic. If you press Alt T, you can check how many bullets are in your magazine, And if you check Alt B, you can actually check the fire setting you're on, so single fire or automatic, without having to change it yourself. These are really important things to know. Sometimes you'll fire 10 or 10 bullets, or, you know, however many bullets you happen to in an engagement. You've got a 30 bullet magazine, or a 10 bullet magazine, or a 5 bullet magazine, and you're really not quite sure. Just pressing Alt T after an engagement will give you a good idea of whether or not it's time to reload, or perhaps not risk the reload time and the sound that comes with it. But these are really great options available to you, and buttons and bindings that I would highly recommend. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, hey, what weapon should I be using in Escape from Tarkov? How do I get weapons? Where do I get them from? Everything in between. Now, weapons in Tarkov are the most important benefactor and understanding of how much damage you do. Tarkov has a ballistic system. This is not a damage-based game. You know, this isn't one of those things where a shotgun is going to be a rifle. Hell, I'm pretty sure in most scenarios a buckshot 12G shotgun won't even be a pistol in Tarkov. It is a full ballistic-based system. And that means that each caliber of bullet will have each caliber of damage. And there is a really good spreadsheet available, which I will link in the description below, by a guy called No Food After Midnight, which has an ammo and armor chart. And it explains what different types of ammunition do to different types of armor. For the most part, newer players probably won't have a lot of armor on them, which is why you can get away with cheap kills. But for the most part, you need to be worried that players who are in the game will be using chest rigs and helmets, and you really need to aim for those chest shots, neck shots, places where it's going to do a lot of damage. But the damage you do inflict, if you feel like you've died instantly, is because you're wearing no armor. But if you feel like the person opposite you who you've shot at is sponging a lot of bullets, it's because they're using a lot of armor, and it's probably because you're using a low caliber weapon. So low caliber weapons include things like 9x19mm, 9x18mm, buckshot shotgun shells. These kind of ammunitions aren't that great. The most powerful in the game are 5.45x39, 5.56x45, 7.62 rounds, and 12.7 rounds. And it can be really confusing to feel like your ammunition isn't doing damage, but for the most part, you know, you need something, for my personal opinion, the lowest ammunition type I would like to take into a raid is 5.45x39, and everything above that is better. Sometimes I'll use, you know, perhaps 9x39 as, an SMG style variant. 9x19mm is not great, 9x21mm isn't great, 9x18 is pretty bad, but 9x39mm is pretty good. And I know it sounds like I'm just spouting loads of words at you, but look at the spreadsheet and you'll understand it. TKM 366 is okay if you're starting with initial weapons, but it doesn't do too well with armor damage in the future. Again, the best rounds really are 7.62x54, 7.62x51, and that spreadsheet is available to all of you. So if you're wondering, I've got all of this stuff in my stash, what weapon do I actually take into this raid? Well, that's your answer there. You want high caliber weapons, and typically you want high caliber weapons that are suppressed as well if you have a suppressor. And if you don't have a suppressor, then don't fret, go into the raid as usual. If you happen to go to your hideout in the future, you can build a workbench where you can mod weapons, buy suppressors from traders in the flea market, and then connect those things together, and thereuphold, you have a suppressed SKS or a suppressed weapon that's good for your usage. So don't feel disheartened if it feels like you've started shooting at somebody and you've just died and they've sponged loads of bullets. There is a good percentage chance that you're using a low caliber bullet that's probably not doing a lot of damage to them. Sometimes it is actually quite easy to miss in Tarkov. I really recommend nailing down your focus key as well, because that's something that's important over range. You want weapons like the Mosin. You want weapons like high caliber AKs, M4A1s. But if you're only just getting started, things like the SKS, things like the Mosin, these are the kinds of weapons that do a fair bit of damage. Some of the lower end AKs will do the damage you're looking for, and you just have to be careful with your shots. I'd say the big distinction I would make is this is how it works. You get the very low end of weapons, which are like 9x19mm, 9x18mm, low damage SMGs. These are the kinds of things that you initially start with, pistols as well. But then it's actually really easy to get hold of AK-47s, AK-74Ms, It's relatively easy to get hold of 5.56 ammunition or 7.62 weapons and 7.62 ammunition, and those are the guns you need to be using. You know, things like the SKS and the Mosin are high damage weapons. These are the weapons that will do the job. And then you're probably asking, well, you know, what do I do after that? Well, that's because after that is the customizable weapons. The big distinction between something like, you know, some ghetto AK that you found off of a scav versus an AK that, you know, you can buy or get from a trader is that those ones are fully customizable. You can include optics, suppressors. You can definitely customize the ones you found off of scavs, but not to the same extent. You know, things like the M4A1 are capable of having things like drum magazines, ACOG sights, laser sights, everything you could possibly want that serves as the same damage type, but gives you advantages in other ways, like optics, attachments, and everything in between. So really shoot towards things like the SKS, shoot towards things like the AK, the Mosin, and really check out that EFT ammo chart. It will really give you a good understanding of how much damage each weapon you own is going to do to an individual player. And of course, simplistically, aim for the head, aim for the face, and you'll probably win most engagements. Now let's talk about your inventory and looting, and let's start with looting. A big question I get asked is, what do I take into a raid, and what should I be looking to take out of a raid? And taking into a raid is relatively easy. You're going to want an AI kit, you're going to want a bandage, you're going to want a splint, and you're probably going to want some painkillers if you can get hold of them as well. You know, the best successful Tarkov raids are the ones where you drop two guys and not a single one of them shoots back at you. But the thing is, Tarkov engagements are messy. You know, if you get hit a couple of times, there's a good chance that you might be limping to the extraction zone. So always be looking for medical supplies if you happen to be in Tarkov, and always take medical supplies in. You're also going to want to take in food and water as well, because over time, your character becomes very depleted in energy and water, and all of that is available in the tab section, which explains just how much energy and water you have. Bear in mind that eating food causes water reduction, so personally I always recommend drinking water first and then eating the food. But for the most part, you won't really have to worry about that stuff too much. It comes into play if you're in a raid for a long duration of time, but that isn't very frequent. I always highly recommend bringing in food and water and bandages, because these are three fundamental things, you know, medical kits, food and water that will get you through the longest of extractions. You know, sometimes in Tarkov, you'll get to an extraction zone and it will tell you, wait, you need 3,000 rubles, go find another extraction. And it can get really long-winded and quite difficult in those situations. And the last thing you want to be doing is limping, passing out, or dying because you just simply didn't have the kit available to you. But in terms of what you should be looting, to put it pretty bluntly, loot everything. You know, your knowledge and understanding of items in Tarkov only extends as far as you as an individual. And the reason I say that is because you're going to come across things every single game that are just different. Things you won't expect, things you won't know about. And if you've got nothing in the slots, just take it with you. You know, purple items tend to be relatively rare and worth a lot of money. Blue items sometimes are surprisingly worth a lot of money, you know. I found a key the other day that was worth 400,000 rubles. I had no idea it was worth that much. It wasn't of any value to me as an individual player, because that key only was for a mission if you were level 44, and I was only level 10, so I sold it because, you know, I'm sure I'll have 400k in the future. But when you're 34 odd levels away, you know, it's not something you need to worry about. And your two biggest friends in this department are the Escape from Tarkov wiki and, more importantly as well, the examine button. If you use the examine button, it will let you see what item it is. It will give you a rough description of what it does. But that's not really useful if you're in a game situation. For the most part, I tend to just throw things in and keep them with me. I don't tend to keep ammos, unless I know they're important ammos like high caliber rounds. Don't take shotgun shells, don't take pistol ammo, none of that stuff's really useful to you. You really want specific things like, you know, high caliber bullets, high caliber magazine cartridges. Those are the kinds of things you should hold on to in that department. But for the most part, make sure you're bringing a few mags with you, some food, some water, some medicine, and try and take everything out of it. Then go to the Escape from Tarkov wiki and you can start understanding what everything does. You can start understanding what nuts and bolts do. You can start understanding, you know, things like gunpowder, for example. Gunpowder is able to create an ammunition crate, which expands your stash storage. You can create different kinds of containers, which expand your stash storage, and you can continue to sell items that aren't worth any value to you, but perhaps are worth value to a trader or somebody else. And once you have access to the flea market, you can sell loads of various different items, from quest items to just individual things you happen to find, and start building up your own financial number so you can start purchasing things you want, be it some modifications you need for your weapon, be it some things you want to do to adjust your hideout or build a modding bench, whether or not you want to build a new container. You know, I bought 3 lots of gunpowder earlier today because I wanted the ammunition container. Now suddenly I've got lots more stash storage. But really, you should be going into raids and just trying to take everything you possibly can out of it. For the most part, always have a plan. You know, are you going to be the guy who's lurking in the bushes, executing other people and stealing their stuff? Or are you going to be the guy who's going into high-density loot zones, trying to open weapon crates and things like that? You know, have a nice mix of the two, but I personally recommend taking it really slow as you first start off. Don't have any over-the-top goals. Don't think you're going to run into the middle of the map where all the loot is and escape relatively unscathed. For the most part, when you're just starting off, you want to get used to killing scavs, killing players, getting their loot, and just getting out, really. You know, once you've got, you know, a weapon on your sling, a couple of extra bits in your inventory, maybe a couple of backpacks and body armors, just extract, really, because you can't carry anything else, and you may as well start building up your own stash that you can use for your PMC. Be that as a scav run or a PMC run, just think about the long term. You know, what do you need? Do you need a helmet right now? If you need a helmet right now, put it in your bag. You know, have you got too many backpacks? Well, don't pick up this one. There are very different options you have in Tarkov, but for the most part, building your own stash, building your own hideout, and taking things from the game is really just more about your own individual knowledge. So there's no point me saying, well, you definitely need X, Y, Z. For the most part in Tarkov, you need to build the modding bench in your hideout to customize your weapons, but everything else is more or less your choice. I would recommend expanding your stash as much as you can, which means building various containers. For example, the ammo container, which requires gunpowder. But again, all of this is available on the wiki. There's no point me telling you about all of it. Just start looking into the wiki. You know, maybe if you pick up something like a USB-C charger, find out what that is on the wiki from Escape from Tarkov. Find out if it's something that perhaps you want to hold on to because it could be useful, or something you could just sell or flog to someone else. And always make sure you have a bountiful supply of medical equipment. That's not something you want to run low on, as well as food and water. But anywho, folks, that's about it from me today, TheTacticalBrit, on Escape from Tarkov. If you have any questions, knock them down in the comment section below, and I will get to them. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon in another video.